This happened to a friend of mine in university. If I were to compare her to someone famous, she looked like a certain idol who performed as the center of her clean-cut group. Girls as beautiful as her usually find themselves the target of jealousy from others, but other girls worshipped her, and I was no different. She was popular with both men and women, and if she went downtown, scouts often tried to sign her up. It was like people would line up to talk to her, but she was only ever surprised at all the attention she got. But I knew her true secret, what she hid in that Louis Vuitton bag of hers. Her medicinal cream for sore shoulders. She couldn't be without it, and was always recommending it to me. After I saw her for the first time in a while, I realized my shoulders were kind of stiff and borrowed some. Ah, this really is good. This seemed to remind her of something, and she began talking. Actually, I don't need this anymore. Why? I asked. I went to a party not too long ago, and one of the guys said, "There's a lot riding on your shoulders." I thought this might have been some new pickup line, but she kept going. He told me I should throw some salt at my back, so I tried it immediately. The next morning, I'd completely forgotten about it, but my shoulders felt so light. After that, I haven't needed to use this anymore. I don't know whether her stiff shoulders were the result of ghosts, but for a girl as beautiful as her, it wouldn't surprise me if spirits were attracted to her as well. Hey guys, I'm your host, Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to another episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. We have a very special announcement this week. Thanks to our amazing patrons over at patreon.com/TaraADevlin, we have met and unlocked our first goal of longer episodes. For as long as we meet this goal, all episodes will be upgraded from 30 to 45 minutes in length. I'd like to thank everyone for all their support. It's thanks to you guys that I'm able to continue making this show. And if you'd like to help support Kowabana, get early access, bonus episodes, and help us towards our next goal, then head over to patreon.com/TaraADevlin right now. You can get immediate access to over 30 exclusive bonus episodes, access to all episodes a week before anyone else, and ad-free listening as well. Again, thank you for all your support and for helping us to reach our first goal. And while we're here, this week you can also grab Toshiden, Exploring Japanese Urban Legends, Reikan, the most haunted locations in Japan, and my Japanese horror novel Kirei, all on sale for just 99 cents each in the US and UK Amazon stores. If you haven't picked any of these up yet, now's your chance. They're only on sale for the next week, so don't miss out on all the urban legends, ghost spots, and creepy fiction that you can handle. Now, on this week's episode, we're going to be looking at encounters with the supernatural and how they changed people's lives forever. Our first story for this week is about a group of university students who live near a creepy apartment building. The windows are covered in newspaper, blocking out all light. But when one of the apartments frees up, one of the students decides to move in. It's a decision he'll soon come to regret. Find out why in Apartment with Covered Windows. This happened when I was in university. There was a strange apartment nearby that people called the Apartment with Covered Windows. It was a regular old apartment building, but the windows facing the road on the first floor were creepy. It was a 2-story building with 5 rooms each, and this one time, every single window was covered in paper, not a crack to be seen, like they didn't want anyone to see inside. The papers consisted of things like newspapers and leaflets, and even idol and anime posters. Each room was different. I heard at the time that one of the apartments on the first floor had just become vacant, and one of my friends said that he wanted to try renting it. I'll call him B-san. He'd just recently gotten a girlfriend and wanted a place to invite her back to. If the rent was cheap, then he didn't care, and so he rented one of the rooms in the apartment with covered windows. We looked up the rumors about the place beforehand, and while lots of people had heard about it, nobody knew of any actual incidents that ever took place there. B-san tried to ask the real estate and the landlord about it, but they told him they'd never heard anything about incidents or ghosts there. They didn't even know anything about the covered windows, because apparently nobody had ever said anything to them. The landlord said that it was an old apartment, so maybe it was for protection against the cold, condensation, or even the setting sun. They had found mold growing in the closet while inspecting the building one day, but it was an old building, so that was to be expected. That was why the rent was so cheap. As such, B-san went ahead and signed the contract. C-san, D-san, and myself helped him with the move. I really wanted to know more about the windows, but he put a curtain up. He bought dinner for us in thanks for helping, and we had nabe at his new place with a few drinks. Thanks to the drinks and exhaustion, by the time midnight rolled around, we were wrecked. The three of us ended up staying that night in his new apartment. We put the nabe table away, and the four of us lay on the floor. I don't know how much time passed, but suddenly I woke up. It felt like someone had brushed my back. I stared into space, half asleep and still drunk, when again I felt it. I turned instinctively, and the curtain was moving. I was sleeping next to the window, so the wind must have blown the curtain against my back. Just the curtain, I thought. Relieved, I lay back down. And then I realized something. It was autumn, so the window was closed, and he didn't have a fan out. So why was the curtain moving? My mind raced when again the curtain brushed my back. Scared, I screamed and jumped up. I turned the lights on and saw it was past 1 a.m. The other three slowly woke up, rubbing their eyes. I explained what had just happened, muttering so fast that they could barely keep up with me. But they just told me I was imagining things and they didn't believe me. Then, before their very eyes, the curtain moved. Everyone screamed at the same time. There was no wind and nobody had moved, so of course we screamed. But the curtain didn't just move. It was like someone was pushing against it from the window. There was no way the wind could do that. What on earth was going on the other side? We stared at it, dumbfounded, when B-san suddenly said, "You want to open it?" We were still kind of drunk, and perhaps thought that if we could find out why the curtain was moving, it would make for a good story. Hell, if it was a ghost, that would be even more amazing. We found ourselves getting more worked up. This was the plan. B-san and C-san would stand on either side of the curtain, wait for it to move, and then they would open it. I would then take a picture. D-san got lucky, and all he had to do was wait and watch. Several minutes passed, and then the curtain moved. B-san and C-san opened it at once. A woman with long hair seemed to be crawling out of the glass, appearing bit by bit. Her dark hair hung loose towards the ground as she crawled out parallel to it. By the time her chest had appeared, our eyes suddenly met. We all closed our eyes at once. When I opened them again, she was gone. The four of us waited until morning, frozen on the spot. Since then, we've never been back to B-san's apartment since. Who on earth was that woman? Every time we pass by that building now, we still tremble just thinking about it. In case you haven't seen them before, Japanese bathtubs are big. Really big. Unlike a Western bathtub, these are meant for soaking in, not washing. As you might expect, modern bathtubs, just like their toilet companions, come with all sorts of fancy buttons and features, such as heating water, reheating water, and even a call button that connects to the living room. These call buttons are supposed to be used in the case of an emergency. For example, if an elderly family member is in the bath and, for whatever reason, suddenly needs help. By pressing the call button, they can alert family members in the living room that something has gone wrong and that they need assistance right away. A handy feature that has undoubtedly saved many lives over the years. But in this next story, a young man gets a little more than he bargained for when he accidentally presses the call button instead of the reheat button. This one's called the call button. One night, my friend from university came to visit me at my apartment. His face was pale, like he'd seen a ghost. He collapsed to the floor, and I asked him what was wrong. He said that he was in the bath and went to press the button to reheat the water, only he pressed the call button instead. Then, he heard a woman's voice call from outside. "Hold on, I'll be there in a minute." My friend lives in a pretty expensive apartment building, but his family live out in the countryside, so he lives alone, same as me. He doesn't even have a girlfriend. Whose voice was that? He wondered, and chills ran down his spine. He couldn't stop trembling. He wasn't sure whether he should get out of the bath, but he couldn't stay in there forever. He quickly put his clothes back on and got ready to run from his apartment, just in case, and burst out the door. "Did you see a woman there?" I asked. "I don't know," he said in a small voice. "I was so scared that I couldn't even look. I just ran for the door, but it was locked and the chain was still on. I'd put the chain on myself when I got back from school." He started trembling again. He ended up spending the night at my place. We left the lights on and drank all night until he finally calmed down. He went back to his family home in the countryside, and his parents had to pick up his stuff from the apartment for him. I haven't heard from him since then. Ever since I heard his story, I'm always careful not to accidentally press the call button on my bathtub by mistake. School playgrounds seem innocent, right? Unlike my school in Australia, where teachers were always on duty during lunch to make sure nobody got hurt, the schools I taught at in Japan only occasionally had a teacher walking around. The smaller the school, the more likely the kids would have to fend for themselves, in the Wild West that is Japanese school playgrounds. If anything ever happened, then you'd have to send a friend to the teacher's room for help, or drag yourself there. In this next story, a young boy is faced with a certain predicament. There's a slide in the playground with a keep off sign, but he's the only one around. Nobody will know if he goes down it, right? What's the worst that could happen? It's just a slide after all. Find out why he should have really listened to that sign in Forbidden Slide. This happened when I was in elementary school. I was one of those so-called latchkey kids, and whenever I got home, nobody was there. This made me so lonely that I always stayed behind at school until it got dark. I spent most of my time throwing around a ball with my friends in the playground, but they all had to go home once it reached 4:30. After they disappeared, I'd play alone for a while, and then finally go home. First on the horizontal bars, then the swings, the monkey bars, and then the climbing pole. Last of all was the slide. This slide was strangely shaped. Once you reached the top of it, it split into a V shape, so it was really 2 slides. Kind of like an elephant with 2 noses. It was no doubt made so 2 children could use it at the same time, but in reality, we could only use the left-hand side. The right-hand side was sealed off with wooden planks and a piece of paper that said, "Keep off." According to the teachers, there was a splinter or something sharp sticking out of it, and somebody had gotten injured, which was why it was forbidden to use. But of course, if you tell children that they can't do something, that makes them want to do it even more. It was evening. Everyone had gone home. I was alone in the playground. Curiosity gripped me. Nervously, I climbed over the wood and went down the forbidden slide. I should have reached the ground in an instant, but it seemed to go on and on. What the? Sensing something wasn't right, I turned and saw a large red face looking at me. It screamed and attacked me. As for what happened next, I honestly don't know. It scared the hell out of me, and when I finally hit the ground, I took off running from the slide. The red face by the side of it was the exact same height as an adult. Yet its head was larger than a normal adult's, and it wasn't a human face. It was red and large, kind of like a namahage or shishi from those lion dances. Basically, something like an oni mask. Thinking that maybe somebody was trying to play a trick on me with a mask, I looked down at its feet. No matter how I looked at it, it appeared to be floating in midair. Then it turned and started chasing me. Not running, but floating through the air. Terrified, I took off. I could hear it grumbling behind me. Gah! Gah! Teacher! Teacher! I ran screaming towards the school, hoping to get help from the teacher's room. However, the school was strangely locked, and I couldn't get in. The front gate was shut as well. As I ran around the school, the monster closed in on me. There was no denying it. It was very much after me. Its red mouth opened and closed, drool dribbling down its chin. I bawled my eyes out, but nobody came to help me. It was like the only things that even existed were the monster and myself, and I couldn't get in or out of the school. I started to think that it wouldn't be long until the monster ate me. I ran and ran, covered in sweat and tears, and made my way back to the playground. I climbed the slide. I thought that maybe, just maybe, if I went back down the slide, then everything would return to normal again. This time, I went down the other side, the left side, the side that didn't have the keep off sign on it. When I reached the bottom, I felt like something had changed, like the oppressive air around me had dissipated. I looked around for the red monster, but it was gone. I went inside the school, and the teachers were in the staff room, and the front gate was also open. But then something even more strange happened. The slide, shaped like a V, with 2 slides, had become just one. That slide used to have 2 slides, didn't it? I tried to confirm with the teachers and my friends, but everyone said it had only ever had 1 slide. Looking closer, there was only 1 landing spot at the bottom, but there was no doubt in my mind that there had been 2. And I even remembered checking the keep off sign with one of my friends. The teachers had told us to stay off it. I remembered. I still vividly remember that red monster, even now. And yet, I seem to be the only one who remembers the 2 slides. I still don't know whether that experience and those memories are real, or if my own memories are wrong somehow. But either way, that was the scariest experience of my youth. Have you ever seen something that you couldn't explain? Sometimes you see something so mystifying that, no matter how you look at it, there's no way to explain it. What if that thing wore the face of your family members? In our next story, a young boy goes to visit his grandparents in the countryside, but it soon becomes evident that something is terribly, terribly wrong. Find out why in Steel Tower. So this story happened a while ago, when I went to visit the countryside. There was this steel tower up in the nearby mountains, like the ones used for electric lines or something. And this thing looked like an upside-down pork roast, and it moved amongst the steel poles. It was carefree, scratching its head, so I thought it might have been a sloth. Only my grandpa was at home, and I remember him drinking tea in front of the family altar, relaxing. Grandma was dead. My brother was off playing somewhere. Dad was at work, and Mum was out shopping. I told him about the sloth, and he said that you usually didn't find sloths on electric lines. I dragged him out the front and pointed to it. It was gone. Of course it was. But what my grandpa did next shocked me. He went to the pillar just past the entranceway, the so-called central pillar of the house, which I heard about later, and he went nuts, punching and kicking it. I was so scared that I ran, but I could still hear him. Before I knew it, the sloth was hanging from the electric wires right in front of me. Only, it wasn't a sloth. It had my dead grandma's face. It was covered in hair, right up to its fingertips, but its face alone was human. Creeped out, I knew something wasn't right and tried to run, but I couldn't move. My grandma laughed and fled, crawling along the line somewhere. It clearly stood out, but nobody else seemed to notice it. I wonder why. Finally, my mum came back, and I guess the villagers noticed what my grandpa had been doing, and they subdued him. Everything went back to normal, but when I got back home and was relaxing with some tea, I found out that Grandpa had apparently died in an earthquake that destroyed his house. Come to think of it, in the end, I never saw his nor Grandma's dead bodies. Culture festivals are a big part of the Japanese school experience, and these often involve a traditional song or dance being taught to children, who then perform for everyone to see on the day. The kids at my school were taught the zenidaiko, which is an instrument made of hollow bamboo with coins inside. The bamboo is decorated with tassels and they're wielded much like drummer sticks to make a noise that sounds somewhat like a tambourine. These were a traditional instrument in the area I lived, and the tradition was passed down through the generations by teaching the kids at school, where they would then later perform during school festivals. In our last story for this week, some high school kids are getting ready for their culture festival, but when they come across some of the instruments kids from a nearby area are using to perform, they encounter something else that seems to have come along for the ride. This one's called Strange Incident Near the Culture Festival. This happened when I was in junior high school. I was the assistant manager of the art club, and we were getting ready for the culture festival that was coming up in a few days. The captain of the club was a childhood friend of mine, but his hands were full dealing with all the other club members. As such, as the assistant manager, it was up to me to deal with the other committees, asking them where they would be placing exhibits, and how many posters they'd be printing, and what floors they'd be on. Basically, I relayed all that information on to the captain. Around this time of year, club activities and committee meetings meant that students were extremely busy, and so the school naturally was full of excitement. As things got livelier, students returned home later and later. No matter how serious we got about it, or how much the teachers tried to help, this was something that we junior high students had to do ourselves, so things rarely ever went according to plan. One day, just a few days before the festival was to take place, it was already pitch black outside, but we couldn't leave until all the exhibits were in place. It was long past home time, around 6 in the evening. Those from the sports clubs were starting to make their way home, but us art club members remained. We were almost done with the exhibits, and it was dark outside, so the captain and I decided it was time to go home. We went about our usual routine, the captain checking all the windows were locked in the art room, while I went to the staff room to let our head teacher know that we were leaving, and could he please lock the art door room after us. He would always check everything else. That was how it always went. The lights in the hall leading to the staff room were dim, and the school seemed completely different to how it did during the day. But I wasn't afraid, because my friend, who I'll call A, from the kendo club was helping us out, and joined me. Every single day, when he was done with kendo, he came running over to see us and help with various things. When I was done talking to the teacher, all that was left was returning to the captain downstairs, and then home time. Or it should have been, but when we got back, A spoke up. I think I left the printouts I need to show my parents in my desk. A's desk was a mess, and everyone knew it. Whenever he got a printout, it would get shoved into his desk like trash, and by the time it showed its face again, it was always crumpled and torn. It was always like this. Even so, for some reason, A remembered the sheets this time, and looked at us like he really wanted to say something. "Go by yourself. We'll wait for you down the front." "What? No way. And you saw Tita upstairs before, right? He's gonna say something if he sees me again. I know it." The Tita A referred to with such disdain was one of the school teachers who wasn't very well liked. He always got into arguments with students, made fun of them, and never let up. That was the only way he ever dealt with anybody, so nobody liked him. But that was because, for better or worse, he always judged people at first sight and quickly grew upset about things. Even when we went to alert the head teacher, he was always like that. He knew we were staying behind late because of the culture festival, but still he'd berate us. "Hey, what are you kids still doing here? It's past home time. Did you get in trouble again? Is that why you're here?" He'd act like he knew nothing about what was going on and just grin. It was probably all just one big joke to him, but to us, when we were seriously going about our work, it was just a waste of time that we'd never get back. It might seem brash, but one time he kept both A and myself behind after cleaning time to listen to some story with no end, and because of that, we were late back to class and got everyone in trouble. We especially disliked him. If you want to avoid him, you'll probably have to take the stairs at the other end of the hall. Our school had a garden in the middle, and the halls and classrooms surrounded it. For that reason, it wasn't impossible to avoid the staff room, but it would mean taking the long way around. But A still seemed to want to take the hall. "But the lights down there are still broken, aren't they?" "What? No way!" A's voice echoed throughout the art room, and I clearly remember the captain rolling his eyes. Yeah, the school was creepy at night, and it wasn't like I didn't feel scared too. But in a childlike way, the school feeling so different at night was kind of exciting. A's problems were his own, not mine. But in the end, the captain gave in. The three of us made our way down the dark hall, relying on the light from outside. A cowered between us in the middle. The school without any light is somewhat new and fresh, huh? He was so scared that he refused to go alone, but now that people were with him, he was happy and joking around. It took all we had not to kick him to the ground. Pissed off at his laughter, we went to shove him, but he dodged us. When we reached the end of the hall, we turned left, and our classroom was just a little further ahead. However, when we saw what was in front of it, all three of us stopped. There was a large drum, and near it, a giant doll that could fit several people. Ah, that's the thing those guys are going to use for the culture festival. The performance from those guys, you mean? The captain and I were childhood friends from the same elementary school, and A was from a school in the next district, which was how we became friends. But our junior high took students from 3 different elementary schools, and each of them had their own cultural music and dances. We learnt them from the elderly as kids, and each year, one school performed their dance at the culture festival. This year, it wasn't ours or A's turn, but the other schools, and the stuff they used was placed in the hall, before our classroom. They practiced in the middle garden, so it must have been easier for them to just leave the stuff in the hall. "What did you guys learn?" the captain asked A. "Us? The flute. Although I didn't really understand it that well," he cheerfully answered. "How about you guys?" A kagura dance, I guess," I said. "Ours isn't very interesting. Their performance this year is probably going to be much bigger. I'm kinda looking forward to it." The 3 of us curiously looked at the drum and the strange doll. "Ah, the printout. A suddenly remembered and then ran into the classroom. A low, deep sound echoed down the hall. "Oi, A, don't be an idiot and kick the drums," the captain complained. But A turned to look at us, his face screwed up like it wasn't me. By the time we realized he wasn't lying, it happened again. It sounded just like a drum being hit. It wasn't a strong sound, but it was definitely a drum. It echoed down the hall again. This time, nobody was near the drum. A was closest to the classroom, and thus the drum, while the captain and I were next to the doll. None of us could have touched it. A strange feeling washed over me. There was a pressure in one ear, like the sound of something far away, and at the same time a pain that was like a buzzing in my ears. It was the ear facing the drum. I mean, these types of things happen all the time, right? Nothing to be worried about, A said quickly, mistaking my confusion about the sound in my ear for fear, no doubt. But as he was talking, he was interrupted by yet another sound. Once again the drum echoed. Once or twice, sure, but 3 times was more than a coincidence, and a little difficult to believe. We bolted for the classroom. We turned the lights on, and the other 2 clutched their chests, but the distant sound in my ear still bothered me. I thought that maybe if I ignored it, it would go away, but the buzzing started to get worse, and I grew scared. Somewhere far away, it sounded like a bell ringing. "Hurry up and get your printouts." Yeah, hang on. Shit, when was this homework from? When A tried to pull a sheet out of his messy desk, everything came tumbling out. There were school newsletters from God knows when, and other printouts all over the floor. Again, the captain rolled his eyes, as though to say, "Give me a break." But then something outside caught his attention. "Hey, do you hear something coming from the hall?" he asked me. "Huh? Oh, no, I don't hear anything." I couldn't tell him about the ringing bell or the buzzing in my ears. Besides, A looked even more afraid than he did. I did my best not to focus on the sound in my ear. "Ah, here it is! Got it!" A found what he was looking for and frantically smoothed the crinkles out. He grabbed everything else on the floor and shoved it all back into his desk. Finally, this time we can go home, I thought. But then A stopped before the door and retched. Annoyed, the captain stared at him. "What is it now?" A looked fearfully down the hall. "No, wait, don't turn off the lights. You mean we gotta go past that drum again?" "If not, then we have to go past Tita and the staff room." "Yeah, but..." "There's a saying that going somewhere is all well and good, but the return can be terrifying." This was exactly that. The drum had only echoed 3 times without anyone touching it, but to us junior high students, that was more than enough to be terrifying. But more than that, the buzzing in my ear had gotten so bad that it was like a nail being driven into my head, and I was drowning in unease. Still, in the end, the drum won out over Tita, and we made our way back down the same hall again. As before, A stood between us. The captain seemed to notice my unease and walked on the side of the drum, so I was the farthest from it. We hurried past it without incident, and as we neared the end of the hall, the 3 of us may have been a little careless. I suddenly turned and looked to the left, at the dark glass window. I saw myself, then A, then the captain reflected in it. But we weren't alone. A tall, white shadow stood in the dark hall. The lights outside suddenly started to flicker all at once. Then, the drum echoed again, larger than before. A was so surprised he jumped into the air, but perhaps luck was on his side. On the other hand, as the lights flickered on and off outside, the captain and I noticed the white figure closing the distance between us. I think the captain was most scared of all. He saw the white shadow up close and froze on the spot. From a distance, it seemed to be the shape of a tall person, but up close, it appeared to be white smoke. It moved strangely, like that of a person, and approached us. But then the drum echoed again, and when the light outside flickered, it was gone. A looked in the direction of the drum, screaming, but having saw what we saw, the captain and I broke out into a cold sweat, and all we could do was tell him to shut up. Thankfully, that hall was the farthest from the teacher's room, so the teachers didn't hear us, and after we shut A up, we managed to safely get outside. The ringing in my ear had calmed down by the time I reached home, and the next day, all of us returned to school as normal. The problem lay with the culture festival a few days later. The drum and doll were used in a performance for the opening ceremony, and the three of us had front row seats. The moment they began, that ringing started in my ears again, and each time the student hit the drum, it was like being hit in the head with a blunt force weapon. I huddled over in pain. My friend next to me noticed and took me out into the hall to see a teacher. The pain in my head slowly went away after a break, and after the performance was done, A and the captain exited with the large crowd of people. They both looked pale and sick. The captain said that the moment the performance began, he was seeing white smoke out the corner of his eyes. As the performance went on, it seemed to close in on him, but each time the drum was hit, it was as though it cleared his vision. It's weird, but with each drum beat, the smoke disappeared, he said. As for A just remembered what happened again that night and grew scared again. He grabbed his neighbors without thinking, accidentally worrying them, he laughed. I have no idea what that white smoke was, nor what the ringing in my ear meant. We're all grown up now, but whenever the three of us get together, we still talk about it. That strange experience we had at the culture festival. Don't forget, you can pick up Toshiden, Reikan, and Kirei in the US and UK Amazon stores right now for just 99 cents each. This sale only lasts for 1 week, so don't miss out. And a big thank you to all of our patrons who made this longer episode happen. Head over to patreon.com/TaraADevlin to get your bonus episodes and early access right now, and help keep this show going. And if you want even more stories, head over to youtube.com/Kowabana Japan for even more exclusive Japanese horror video game translations each week. We've been translating Gakko de Atta Kowai Hanashi for a few months now, and we're just starting on Hyaku Monogatari as well. Thanks guys, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.